All right, welcome back to the Strength Culture YouTube channel. So today's going to be a follow-on video from my last video that I did on the 3 factors that affect strength. So we're going to be looking at specifically the bench press and the pin press, which is one of our favorite variations for improving your bench press and getting overall higher loads and a better executed bench press. So we'll dive into some of the benefits that you can get out of programming and exercise variations such as the pin press, and then we're going to take Jamie Smith through the pin press and teach you how to set it up and execute it. All right, so we're going to be going through the pin press with Jamie. Now, a couple reasons that you want to try and use loading implements or external cues to help with skill execution is it gives you a reference point to work with externally. So in this case, it's going to be the pins, having a place to bring the bar down to, and then a reference point of how far our chest is away from the pins. So before we get into actually how to execute the pin press, before we take Jamie through it, a couple of reasons why you want to do this and how it would affect your bench press. One is it's going to help decrease the range of motion of the bar path. So obviously the more we can decrease the range of motion, the overall greater loads we'll be able to lift. So by having the pins there, we leave a little gap between the chest and the bar, and eventually over time we close that gap down and reduce the range of motion. So secondly, it's going to help with overall positioning by allowing us to stack the elbows directly under the wrists, because where we place the bar on the pins is going to greatly affect that elbow stacking position. So we'll take Jamie through now, and then we'll teach you also how to set it up so that you can best execute it and some of the common mistakes we see with the setup. When it comes to performing the pin press, you're best to use a rack where you have a little bit more flexibility with adjusting the pins and the bar. Because with the competition rack over there, you are limited by how high you can set the pins. They only go to a certain height, and when I have done them in that rack before, my chest is virtually touching the bar. And we do want a little bit of a gap between the bar and the chest, as we'll see when Jamie does it now. We do want a little bit of a gap here. We can see there's about 1 inch. So it is critical that you do set the pins up at the right height. So finding a cage or a rack like this is probably your best bet. Another common mistake with the setup though is that you either have the pins too low. Pins are too low and he has to flatten out to touch the pins, and then we're sort of defeating the purpose of the movement, which is trying to decrease the range of motion and get the chest as high as possible. So now we'll take Jamie through the pin press and just teach you how to execute it and then why it's beneficial to improving your skills. So you have to do a few reps. So you'd execute it exactly like a normal bench press. Couple key things here when it comes to improving skills we touched on before is chest position. So for a competition bench press or a powerlifting bench press where we're trying to move the most load possible, it's critical that we get our chest in the right position. This means keeping our chest as high to the roof as possible. The pin press allows us to see the gap between the chest and the bar. So if we see Jamie's chest drop down, you can see the gap increases, and this is probably not the best for our bench press skill execution, lifting the overall greatest loads. So when we come down to the pins, we probably want to pause for a little bit, really emphasize driving our chest up to the bar, and eventually over time of implementing this after weeks and weeks and weeks, that we start to close down that gap. And eventually we'd probably even like to see the chest touching the bar. So when it comes to improving skill as well, specifically for a movement like this or any other accessories you're looking at doing, you probably want to film your sets and get angles that allow to see your position and how you're executing the movement, because this will give you direct objective feedback if you are performing it correctly and actually getting what you want out of the movement. There's no point applying a pin press or programming a pin press and then not actually focusing on keeping your chest up nice and high. So the next thing we'll go through is the stacking of the elbows and the wrists in the pin press. When Jamie's performing the pin press, and for anyone else out there that is going to do this movement, you want to make sure that you'll bring the bar down into the correct position on the pins. And that's why the pins are there, as an external cue, so that we have to touch on the exact right spot, because any deviation forward, like so, we'll see the elbows move further away from the bar, and then we're not in a really good position to produce force and lift the barbell off the pins. And vice versa, any position back where the bar is too far towards the chin and elbows are too far under. So we need to make sure that we are touching correctly on the pins, because if we don't, it's going to be a hell of a nightmare trying to lift it up. So this is another good reason to film your sets when you're trying to improve your skill of a powerlifting movement like the bench press or the pin press. You need to see how you're executing them. So if you don't already have a coach that can watch your sets and give you some feedback, I highly recommend you film your sets. But I do recommend that you do get a coach. Go learn off someone that is better and has more experience than you. All four of us coaches here at Melbourne Strength Culture all have our own coaches.
You and I seem so involved. We should go and spend it all.
So the purpose of this video is to have a little bit more of a practical understanding of how to improve your skill execution. So in the last video that I spoke about why it helps, but this is more about how do we actually do it. And that's the important part when it comes to getting stronger. You actually need to go practically apply this in the gym. So we're going to talk a little bit about the programming considerations of improving your skill. Now specifically, we've gone through the pin press today, but you can apply this to any variation. It could be pin squats, it could be a tempo bench, tempo squats, SSB squats, anything you're using to improve skill or a specific motor pattern. So for this example, we're obviously using bench press and the pin press. So a typical way of structuring this in a program would look at doing bench press in a 3 times a week frequency. Bench press is an upper body movement. It can handle a little bit more volume and a little bit more frequency throughout the week because it does recover a bit quicker than, say, squats and deadlifts. So we're looking at a 3-day-a-week frequency. Day 1 would be your competition day. So this would be your standard competition bench press, touch to the chest. For this example, we're just doing 4 sets of 5 reps at roughly 7 to 8 RPE. On day 2, we're implementing the pin press that we've just gone through, and this is a day to start working on some skill execution that we want to maybe improve, whether it's that position on the pins or improving the decreasing the range of motion of the bench press. So in this example, I've gone a top double at a 7 to 8 with back off sets of 3 by 4 at roughly 6 to 8 RPE. Now it's important to know the reason why I've put the top double in there is because I do think that to lift heavy weights, you need to practice lifting heavy weights. Heavy weights feel heavy, form starts to break down, and you do need exposure at those heavy weights to really work on your skill execution. If you're just doing your pin press at really sub-max loads below RPE 6, you're probably not going to get what you want out of it in terms of improving your skill. And you do need to lift those heavier loads. So that's why I've programmed a top double there. And then on day 3, we're back to competition bench press, but we're using what we call here as an inverse day. So we're doing 16 total reps, but we're inversing it and doing 8 sets of 2. I've put roughly 4 to 6 RPE because we're going to keep them quite sub-max. And this is a day to really just work on technique and execution, not at the heavier loads. One thing to know with this inverse day and how it helps with skill execution is that we're doing total of 16 reps, but because we're inversing the sets, we get a little bit more time and break in between sets. So as I said before, filming sets can be really critical here. You could film set 1, oh, I can see that I potentially did this a little bit wrong. You can adjust it on set 2 and vice versa going on. So rather than doing 16 reps that are quite difficult, hard with a bit of form breakdown, you can do 16 quality reps and start to ingrain that really good sound motor pattern for your bench press in this example. So that's an example of how we would program some variations within, say, the bench press to start to improve our skill execution and skill acquisition of a movement. So you can go ahead and use that exact sample in your training if you want. But if you are someone that is interested in, say, improving your skill a little bit more, we've got a couple options here at Melbourne Strength Culture. Obviously, we're available for coaching and online coaching. That's always an option. We also have our new product that we're releasing, which is just 3 one-on-one sessions at $100 each. It's $300 of total payment, and you get 3 one-hour sessions with one of us coaches if you want to do some skill and technique work. The other option is I've already written a 31x1 program that's available online that is purely based around skill acquisition via the use of tempos. So if you want to check that out, you can go through our website. Donnie can chuck it in the link in the comment box below as well. But as always, happy lifting and good luck getting your skill. That was shit. Fucking shit. Fuck. Getting your skill. Getting your skill.